This is This Week in Science and Education, Episode 30, recorded Tuesday, March 15th. Canadian astronaut Julie Payette. This is This Week in Science and Education, the show that talks all about the latest science advances and research and how to take that information or bring it into today's classroom. On today's show, Canadian astronaut Julie Payette. All that and more coming up next on This Week in Science and Education. This Week in Science and Education is brought to you by Sheridan Institute of Technology and Advanced Learning. At Sheridan, students shine brighter. Visit SheridanShineBrighter.com. It's time for This Week in Engineering and Education. This is your regular host, Kevin Cougler. Thanks to everyone for joining us and taking the time to talk to our excellent guest today, which we're very excited to have, which is Ms. Julie Payette from the Canadian Space Agency. Welcome, Julie, to the show, and thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Hello.
Julie, before we get to asking you questions, and we do have some young men here from the local high school who are keen to ask you some questions, I do want to take a moment to introduce my co-host, as always, from Engineers Canada, the CEO, and my partner in all of this, Chantal Guay. Hi, Chantal.
Hi, Kevin.
Bonjour.
Hello, Julie. Very exciting day today.
Very exciting, very excited, and not just us, but these gentlemen to my right, which I'll take a moment to introduce, are very excited as well. Mark Jackson is immediately to my right. Mark, give a little wave. Mark is from Huron Park Secondary School, and joining him is Malik Carter, who is also from Huron Park Secondary School, and they've prepared some questions for Ms. Payette. So maybe to get the show started, we'll just turn it over to the boys and let our youth speak for us, and maybe start with Mark and have him ask his first question. Would that be a good way to start, Chantal?
Absolutely.
Okay, super. Mark?
Hello, my name is Mark Jackson. I go to Huron Park Secondary School, and I'm 15 years old. Ms. Payette, what made you want to be an astronaut?
Hello, Mark. Nice to talk to you. Nice to see you. This question clearly it comes back a lot, and like most people, I was inspired when I was a kid, a little younger than you guys. When I was a kid, at the time, our American friends were launching astronauts to the moon on the Apollo missions. So when I was in primary school, I was watching that on TV. I thought that was the greatest thing. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to put the spacesuit on. I wanted to ride the rocket. And most importantly, I wanted to drive the lunar rover on the surface of the moon. I was 9, 10 years old. I was watching that. There was a couple of problems there. I was Canadian, and at the time there was no such thing as Canadian astronaut. I did not quite understand what the Apollo astronauts were saying because I did not speak much English, and any English actually at the time. I was a girl. There was no girl astronaut. There were a few things. You know, my chances of being a military fighter pilot when I was 9, most people thought was pretty slim. But it didn't matter, because that is exactly what is the beauty about being inspired when you're a kid, is that you see something you'd like to do. And then the only thing you can do is to work hard to try to make it, and there's a chance you will. So that's what happened.
Super. Thanks for that answer, Ms. Payette. Malik, do you have a question for Ms. Payette?
Yeah. Hello, Ms. Payette. My name is Malik Carter. I go to Huron Park Secondary School, and I'm 14 years old. And my question to you is, how did you prepare for this mentally, physically, and emotionally?
Thank you, Malik. Nice to talk to you as well. This is not a job, an astronaut job, but it's very similar to piloting. It's very similar to any of the rescue services. It's not a job you do just like that off the bat. You just don't one day walk into the space shuttle and then go to space. This is a very long time in the making. We get selected and then we get trained for years and years before we get the first chance to go to space. So we have ample time to know exactly what we're supposed to do, what our responsibilities and what our tasks are. We understand very well the environment in which we are, so the spacecraft itself, but also the environment where we're going to be working in space. And we rehearse a lot of our activity in simulators on the ground. This is particularly important because in a simulator, you can make all kinds of mistakes. If they fail a computer for the spacecraft in the simulator and you don't know how to fix it, well, you'll learn about it, and then the next day you can go back in the simulator and try the procedure again. In space, there's not much room for error. Actually, there's no room at all. So the simulator prepares us very well. We spend hours and hours, months at a time in there practicing our procedure and responding to problems and malfunctions inside the spacecraft. So by the time we go to space, we're actually very, very familiar with what we're doing with our spacecraft, and therefore it's not that hard. It's amazing what training can do for you, right here on the ground or in space. If you know what you're doing, you're not apprehensive, you're not worried, you're not scared, because you have that body of knowledge that supports you, plus the teamwork, of course.
Ms. Payette, you started off by talking about how you applied to be an astronaut, and I noticed from your website that when you applied, you were one of 5,330 applications for only 4 positions that were available. Can you tell us what the process is like of actually applying? Where do you apply? How do you apply? How long does it take in order to get that first interview? What is the process like to apply to be an astronaut?
Thank you for the question, Kevin. It's the same in almost any country that have astronaut program, and it's only a few right now. One day there'll be more, but right now there's countries like the USA, Russia, Japan, the European Space Agency, which is the umbrella organization for all the countries in Europe that participate into the space program, have astronaut programs. Canada has one also through the Canadian Space Agency. And the only way, if you're a Canadian citizen, to become an astronaut right now is to apply to the Canadian Space Agency when the Canadian Space Agency has a recruitment program. In its history, the Canadian Space Agency has recruited 3 times. Once in 1984, once in 1992, and just recently in 2008. So the first thing that you need to do if you want to become an astronaut is that you better apply during one of those recruitment process. Otherwise, the statistics is very clear. 100% chance of not making it in. In order to apply, usually the advertisement says that you need to have 4 basic criteria. You need to be a Canadian citizen. You need to have a university degree in a technical field, which means engineering, science, medicine. But you can have any degree you want. You don't have to be an aerospace engineer to apply to an astronaut program. You can be a zoologist, you can be a veterinarian, you can be a medical doctor. You have to have another career, and that other career has to have basis in science and technology. That's a prerequisite nowadays. Again, it will change one day, but not now. The other 2 criteria is that you need to have a good health. Basically, you have to have very good health. And you have to have some communication skills, the ability to communicate with other people. And you just then send your resume and a letter, and you write everything you've ever done. Since you were a 7-year-old delivering newspaper on your bicycle, anything that you think will be a way to impress those people that will review the first application, because the first applications are reviewed only on paper. So it takes a few weeks, and then you get an answer from the Canadian Space Agency telling you whether or not you've made the first cut into a few hundred people. And then they send you more paperwork, and then again you fill that up, and it's only fairly further into the process that you get your first interview. And most of the time it is a medical exam and an interview with a psychologist who's just going to make sure that you don't have any mental problems or that basically you're a normal person and that you can continue on. The medical aspect is, of course, really important. Then they get to another process where they start having panel interviews where you have to go and impress 7, 8, 9 people and tell them that you're it and that they should hire you. So it's true for any job to be able to share with other people why you think you could be a contributor to their business or their institution is a very important skill, young men. So don't be afraid to go and put your name down for what the kinds of things you want to do one day.
And how were you notified? Did they send you a letter? Did they call you and say, congratulations, you've finally been selected? How exactly do you get notified?
Every single step of the way, we would get first letters to fill out more paperwork and more essays. And then at the level of 50, we got a phone call that we were in the 50, and then a phone call that we were in the 20, and then a phone call that we were one of the 4.
And do you remember what you did that night?
Yes, it was a normal night. It's a life-changing experience when you sign up for a program like that, and people have to be conscious of that. Before that, I was and still am a very ordinary person, and overnight you become very much a public figure, and that has impact on the people around you. So we weren't sure how things would go, and it changes some of the plans that you had made, clearly. Mm-hmm. But if you want something really badly, then it'll come with compromise. And that was a really, really small compromise to make, to have the privilege to go and fly in space.
Well, we're certainly glad that you did, and I know the boys are really enjoying talking to you today. Chantal, I'm sorry I've left you out until now. I'm sure you're bursting with questions for our guest. Feel free to jump in.
Well, my main question to Julie is, why engineering? I'm very curious to hear, you obviously wanted very much to be an astronaut. Why engineering?
Hello, Chantal. Thank you for the question. I did mention earlier that you don't become an astronaut by going to school. You become an astronaut by becoming something else and then applying to an astronaut program. And for me, it was very clear that the chances that I would be spending the rest of my life doing another job than astronaut was much higher probability than being picked as an astronaut. So you then pick something you like. First and foremost, this is paramount in a choice of career, is pick something you like, something that you're good at. Don't pick what your father or mother would like you to do, or pick something that you know you're going to be able to put effort and spend time in. And you can always change your mind, by the way. That is not a crime. So for me, it was very clear. I'm an engineer through and through. This is the kind of thing that I liked to do when I was a kid, and when it came time to choose what degree I would do at university, I didn't even hesitate. I like doing things with my hand. I like to operate things. I like to design, and I like the problem-solving aspects of things, of putting things together in order to have something new that brings benefit. Engineering.
I think it's time to take a... Sorry, Chantal, follow-up question?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Any influence from family members, Julie? And I know your dad is an engineer, but I'm just curious. Any influence? Did he have any influence on you becoming an engineer?
You know, people try to draw that kind of parallel all the time. I think it's human nature. But what I really wanted to become was a pilot. And I wanted to fly airplanes. And there's nobody that flies airplanes in my family. Since then, I have become a pilot, and I've given a lot of first flight to some family members. I don't know why. And this is, again, I think, important. I think we all have something that really steers us, that we dream about, or that we really get going with. The trick is to identify it. And for some reason, I felt like, hey, I'd like to fly airplanes, and I wanted to fly fast airplanes. So even before I entered engineering, I called the Canadian Forces and asked if I could join the training program to become a military pilot. Unfortunately, this was 1982, and at the time, the programs were not open to women. So I was offered all kinds of other positions, including engineering. but there was no pilot position, so that didn't work out. But that path didn't work out, but another path did, and I became a pilot later. And one last little anecdote is that the first time that I was by myself in an airplane, a small little airplane during pilot training, I thought, wow, here I am at the control of a small little airplane, and I feel like I'm at home. So it was a feeling that, hey, I wanted all this time, not knowing exactly how it felt, was really where I was destined to be. And I think we all have that in us, to find our path and to find our interests. We have to dare to dream, whatever it is, that dream.
And since that time, I think I'm not wrong in saying that you've amassed over 1,600 hours of flight time. I believe your husband is also a test pilot, if I'm not mistaken. So flying is very much a part of your family. I notice you have children. Will they be entering into some type of flying career as well, do you think?
I don't know. They fly. They've flown with me many times, and they fly commercial a lot. So they're clearly very at ease with flying. I do not think so. My oldest son wants to be a veterinarian, and my youngest one is too small to know. But the only thing that really I would say we have put down as being a must for them is that they can be whoever they want. The one thing that would be disappointed, the parents, is if they're nothing, if they choose to do nothing. And so we're encouraging them to pursue their dream, and it might be aviation, and that will be just fine.
Well said. How about taking another question from one of our students here, Ms. Payette?
Absolutely.
Mark, would you like to ask another question?
Sure. What do you do for fun in space?
During the kind of missions that I was part of, which are construction mission to the International Space Station, there are short duration space shuttle mission, very, very busy. We don't have much free time. But every second that we have, the main activity that we do is to float to a window and to look at the absolutely magnificent spectacle that is passing by outside the window, called planet Earth. It's so beautiful. It's extraordinary that we inhabit such a beautiful world, so intricate, so colorful. And when you're in your small spacecraft on orbit of the Earth, you appreciate even more this planet of ours that we all share, by the way, and that is currently the only place where we humans can live.
Malik, question for Ms. Payette?
Sure. What was your most memorable moment of your career?
Well, that's not a fair question, Malik, because this is a really fun job, and it's the best job on Earth, as I call it. It's hard to pick one thing. I mean, how can you differentiate between shooting up in the sky on 2.2 million pounds of fuel with flame coming out of your back and accelerating from 0 to 28,000 kilometers per hour in 8.5 minutes? That's pretty thrilling. That's the liftoff. Then, as we get to space and we start chasing the space station, we see a star, a very bright star, brighter than Venus in the morning sky. And that is the space station. And as we continue maneuvering toward it, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time it's right above us, just before we're about to dock to it, it is so impressive and so big. It's the size of 2 football fields. And here we are on a very choreographed maneuver, have to dock the space shuttle to that International Space Station. Well, that's quite an impressive moment. So it's hard for me to tell you what would be the best time. It's been a very privileged career so far.
Lots of good times by the sounds of it. I do want to welcome to the show Dr. Thomas Merritt from Laurentian University, one of my regular co-hosts on This Week in Science and Education. Hey Thomas, how are you? And say hello to Ms. Julie Payette from the Canadian Space Agency.
Hi, nice to meet you. Sorry I'm joining you guys so late.
No, that's
Nice to
okay.
have you.
Maybe give us a little bit of a close-up of you there, Thomas. Your head's a little bit cut off for us.
Yeah, I'm working here. Let's see. Better?
In the meantime, while Thomas is playing with that, we're talking a little bit about the space shuttle, and as we all know, the space shuttle program is coming to an end fairly soon. The remaining orbiters will be retired at different locations and different museums, I guess, around the United States, if I'm not mistaken. Ms. Payette, I guess my question is, where do we go from here? We have the International Space Station, and we don't have any more orbiters in the United States, anyways, to get up there. I understand the Soyuz is going to be one of the options to visit the ISS. Give us your opinion of where we go from here and in the space program in North America.
Well, first, let me give you the situation. I mean, we do have transportation to and from the International Space Station, and that is for people. And that is through the Russian spacecraft Soyuz. And this is how, in the next few years, the astronauts from all nationalities that participate in the International Space Station program will go up the station and come back from it under Russian vehicle. In the meantime, our American friends are on the drawing books already to design a new, heavier lifting rocket and a crew transfer vehicle, which would then be able to dock to the space station. But we're a few years away from that. And there is now the emergence, and this is the first time in history, of commercial companies who are interested in providing cargo service, so transfer of unmanned pieces of equipment to the space station, and also eventually of people. But you can imagine, however, that transporting equipment or a satellite is a completely different business than transporting people. So we right now have Japan, Europe, and some commercial company like SpaceX, for example, that are able to put rockets with cargo in space. But so far, the only player in terms of sending people in space currently is Russia, until we get new vehicles.
Well, we hope those are coming soon. We're looking forward to the U.S. jumping back in with what we anticipate will be a fantastic vehicle. Thomas, I do want to give you a chance to jump in. You're joining us a little late. I'm sure you have some questions for Ms. Payette.
Actually, just I'm curious, given the last comment, if you've got an unmanned capsule that's bringing equipment up to the space shuttle, to the space station, how do you pilot it into the space station? So, I mean, there's pilot there. I assume when the shuttle's going in that you actually get to turn the thing. So what do you do with an unmanned capsule?
That's an excellent question, and we've been doing that for a long time, is that it's remotely piloted. In the case of the Soyuz resupply vehicle, it is piloted from the ground by the mission control in Moscow all the way to a certain point near the station, and they have tested their remote piloting abilities all the way to docking. However, while that last, what we call the proximity approach is happening, astronauts on board the space station are at the control of another remote operated system that can override. So if they see that the trajectory of the unmanned vehicle is incorrect and it's going to hit the station like it happened on their space station Mir many years ago, the commander inside the station is able to override and try to alleviate any problem. The same with the Japanese transfer vehicle and with the European ATV, automated transfer vehicle. They are operated from the ground but with override capability. Very important that, because we never know what's going to go wrong.
The override sounds awesome. That's a great point. Let me ask one more question. I apologize having come in so late if you've already been asked this, but what was the most surprising thing when you were in space? Have we already asked you what happened, or what part of your experience hadn't you anticipated or was drastically different than you anticipated?
Well, we didn't ask that question that way. We asked whether what was my best memory or my best time, which is impossible to answer. However, there are very few things that surprise us because we're so well prepared, so well trained. our simulators are of such high fidelity, the switches are exactly the same dimension, they feel the same, they operate the same as they do on the real vehicles. The entire cockpit of the space shuttle is replicated in the simulator exactly to scale, and the software that runs behind is the actual flight software, which, oh, by the way, is a great idea, because if we find a bug while doing the simulation on the ground, well, it's a bug that could have happened in space as well, so it's a very fun technology. But because of that, there are times when you arrive in space and you're working on a particular task or panel, and it's almost like if you were on the ground, except for one thing. The one thing we are not exactly prepared for and that we have to adapt once we get there is to the state of weightlessness. That is not possible to practice on the ground. Unlike some people who think that, like in Star Trek, you can go into a room and flick a switch, gravity on, gravity off. It doesn't work that way. Gravity is here all the time, pulls us all the time, and never, ever, ever stops doing that. The only way to counteract it, because it's an acceleration, is to accelerate in the opposite direction, and that's what happens in the spacecraft. This is an adaptation. There's this moment right after liftoff, and I don't know if Mark and Malik remember how long it takes to go to space and to accelerate from 0 to 28,000 kilometers per hour. Do you guys remember? I mentioned it.
8.5 minutes.
Good
Yeah.
guys, wow.
Look
So
at that.
8.5 minutes only to go and accelerate to 25 times the speed of sound. But as you accelerate during those 8.5 minutes inside the rocket, strapped to your seat, you are pushed down by acceleration onto your seat and up to 3G, which means that you feel 3 times heavier, pushed to your seat, up until that 8.5 minutes, at which time we shut down our engines. And then in a quarter of a second, we go from 3 times heavier to everything starts floating in the cabin. We're in weightlessness. And I can tell you that this is something that the brain is not quite prepared for, because we are earthbound gravity creatures that have spent all our lives and evolved here under a gravity field. So then the brain says, whoa, nobody told me about this. What is this? What's going on? Because it has to adapt to this new environment, and that's when astronauts, most of them, experience the space adaptation syndrome that can range from small discomfort to plain outright not feeling good.
We are talking with
That's great, thank
Ms.
you.
Julie Payette today from the Canadian Space Agency. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Chantal, last question from you before we take a short break, please.
I was just wondering how you feel about Discovery retiring. Any kind of regrets, like a little pinch, because you've been on that shuttle a number of times, and like, I don't know, just how you see it.
Well, I would say it's not about Discovery itself or Endeavour, which I flew on my second flight. It's about the space shuttle program. It's one of a kind. The space shuttle is the only and first and only spacecraft that can take off with a cargo inside, transform from a rocket to a spaceship, and then glide back on Earth as a re-entry vehicle with cargo inside. It's the only space cargo ship that has ever been designed and in work. So when we retire it, we also lose that capacity for the number of years it will take to have a new cargo ship. However, this is also the way we progress, the way we move forward. We can't just stick to a particular technology because we like it and we've ridden on it. To make a really simple analogy, if we liked the Roman carriage 2,000 years ago, then maybe we shouldn't have invented the car. You need to move on, and that's what our American friends have decided to do, and to build a new spaceship to go even further than low Earth orbit.
We need to take a quick break to thank one of our sponsors. When we come back, I'll ask Ms. Payette about her experiences as a Canadian in space and get her perspective on what that meant to her. But before we get to that answer, I do want to mention our good friends here in Woodstock at Mueller Systems, who are the makers of good backup software for your home computer, for your network, for all of those important pictures and files that you don't want to lose. If you need your information protected, and we all do, you never know what might happen out there. For instance, this past week, my wife and I had a flood in our basement, and thankfully I had all of my computer systems up off the floor, but if I hadn't, it would have been sitting in an inch or two of water, and catastrophic failure could have occurred. So in that case, you really need to have a company like Mueller Systems to help you with your online backup into the cloud. Without it, you're not fully protected. So if you visit their website today at Mueller Data, that's MULLERDATA.com/VROC, VROC, you can try out their backup software free for 90 days, and we encourage you to do so and thank Mueller Systems for their support of This Week in Engineering and Education and all of the other VROC podcasts. Back to the show, Ms. Payette, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, as a Canadian, you're on 2 space shuttle missions, and you have people surrounding you from other countries, predominantly the U.S., but other countries as well. Talk about the pride you felt being a Canadian and being in that environment and what it meant to you as a Canadian to be involved in the program.
Thanks for the question. The answer is twofold. About Canada, first, clearly we're a small populated nation. At 34 million people, we're not that many people in a very, very, very large land. So we have to make strategic decisions about how we're going to invest our resources, how we're going to deploy our people, how we're going to participate. However, it is really important as a privileged nation like we are, that we do participate in big international projects. It's the only way. The International Space Station would not have seen the life of space if it hadn't been for the fact that many nations, wealthy nations, got together to build this incredible structure in the most hostile environment possible. So it is very important that as a participant in this infrastructure of the world, that Canada be a player. What Canada has been quite clever about in the space business in particular is to discover itself some niches, some special technical aspects where it could contribute very well without having to do everything. So we don't build rockets to send people to space. We have partnerships with other people to do, but then we provide other systems. So as a Canadian, I was particularly proud, you can imagine, to have the chance to operate one of the things that we are so renowned for, the Canadian Arm. I first operated it on my first mission in 1999, and then when I got on my second, there were 2 Canadian Arm, one on the shuttle and one permanently on the space station, the Canadarm2. This is kind of fun because it's not only very advanced technology, but it works superbly. It doesn't fail, and if it does, it has procedure. It's just a joy to operate, and all my colleagues, wherever they're from, all have a grand time. And we have that little flag on the operating panel inside the space station or inside the space shuttle that reminds everybody that this was Canadian technology and that is our contribution to this big project. So this is really cool. And it's really, really cool to be a representative then within a much bigger project than us or me, certainly as an individual. It's great to be part of a team like that. One anecdote that was very funny is during the training we have a procedure on the space shuttle that if the arm is deployed, the Canadarm is deployed, and for some reason is stuck, which has never happened for real, but in the simulator we have all kinds of situations that are plausible but not necessarily going to happen. So if the arm was deployed and stuck and it's time to come home, we need to close down the cargo bay of the space shuttle in order to come home and down into the atmosphere without burning. If the arm is in the way, then you can't close the door and you can't come back on the ground. So we have a procedure that is called jettison the arm. And we have a special place where with explosive pyrotechnics, we can get rid of where the arm is anchored on the space shuttle and then it drifts out in space. So during my training, often they would give me the task of doing the jettison of the Canadarm, and then they would play the Canadian national anthem on the radio. It would be a crime.
It would. Millions of dollars, I think, would be jettisoned into space then, right? We'd never want that to occur.
Yeah, but lives would be saved, so.
This is true. I think we have another question from our students here, Ms. Payette, if you don't mind. Mark, let's start with you.
What is it like to be in the initial blast-off?
It's very impressive. It's very, very impressive. It is such powerful. Rocket propulsion is all about the initial impulse. The hard part is to start moving from the ground and then extricate yourself from gravity as you accelerate up. And because, of course, the air is denser near the surface as it is up in the atmosphere, this is the hard part. So we harness an enormous amount of power in the initial impulse. So when you're sitting in the cockpit and you know at T = 0 that the big solid rocket boosters are going to ignite, you get this kick and you know you're going somewhere and it's straight up. There's a boulevard of flame coming out, but it's controlled flame. It's quite a ride. Beats out your typical amusement park ride.
I think the original 7 astronauts used to refer to that as lighting the candle, if I remember correctly.
Correct, and that is in reference to, if I want to be a little technical here, the space shuttle system has 5 boosters, 3 engines on the shuttle itself, and 2 white rockets that are attached to the big tank. The 3 engines are fired 6 seconds before liftoff. At T - 6 seconds, the 3 engines are fired, but then nothing moves because the bolts that hold the entire stack are still on. And as we go from 6 seconds to 0, that's when they test the engine real fast with the software, and they will shut everything down if they see anything wrong with them. But if they're working well, at T = 0, then the 2 solids will light, and it's like a candle. Once they light, you can't shut them down like a liquid engine, and they will burn until there's no fuel in it. So at that very moment, many things happen. The big solid rocket booster lit, and the bolts that hold the stack together, they basically crack in 2 and let you go. There's only 8 bolts that hold the whole thing together. It's quite a complex but beautiful engineering device.
Amazing. Malik, question for Ms. Payette, please.
Yes. What is your daily routine like?
We have a flight plan, we call, something that is worked out months, if not years in advance, but it's almost to the minute, to the 5-minute. Every crew member is listed on this plan with increments, and you know what you're supposed to do or where you're supposed to be at any given time. So it's we all get up at the same time. We all have about an hour to get ready, which means eat, wash, dress, get ready also by reviewing what you're supposed to do, and then you start your day. I was on a construction mission to the space station twice. They're very, very busy. Most of the time I was at the control of a robotic arm. So I just go and do part of my task. You know, I'm a team member and I do part of my task. And we have a break for lunch, which we never take most of the time. You just float by the little oven there and you take some space food and then you continue on. You just don't have time. And we work all day. We have objectives to accomplish every day. If we don't accomplish all these objectives, they replan them for the next day and they send us a new plan. And it's like that every day. At night, they give us another hour to get to wind down, send a few emails, eat, get ready for bed, unroll your sleeping bag, get into it, and then you sleep 8 hours, all at the same time.
Ms. Payette, this has been such a treasure to have you today. It's been such a lot of fun. I do have a somewhat serious question that I'd like to pose to you, if I may. And I apologize, I'm going to read it from my laptop. I prepared ahead of time because I wanted to make sure I had my facts straight. So I'll just read this In 1999, you flew with Colonel Rick Husband, who piloted the Discovery on mission STS-96 and later served as the crew commander of Columbia on STS-107. Now, I remember exactly where I was when I heard about the news of the Columbia tragedy on February 1st, 2003. I'm sure you do as well. The risks and rewards of space exploration and scientific discovery, these are well documented, but I'm thinking there might be students out there that are hoping for a career as an astronaut. And what message could you give them about taking these risks?
Well, there's risk for everything. I'm very pragmatic about this. There's risk crossing the street every day. There's risk taking your car, which, oh, by the way, are much higher than if you take an airplane to go somewhere. So risk is a calculated thing. It's a comprehended aspect. Spaceflight is a risky business, but we understand where the risks are and we understand what the probabilities. The thing is that the probabilities are still better that you will be fine than things will go wrong. So what we do is we try to mitigate as much as possible the risk. We try to have safer system, but rocket propulsion is rocket propulsion. It's basically a big bomb, control bomb, that pushes as much cargo as possible up away from the center of the Earth. So it comes with some risk. We're all very aware of it, but I look at that and it is a small risk for the privilege to go and work in space to represent your country. I think that what you're probably alluding to is the fact that some people lost their lives. Some of them were colleagues of mine, very close to me, people who had wife and husband and children. And this happened in the middle between my first and my second flight, and I did get the question. Because on my second flight, I had a young son at home in particular, and they were saying, well, aren't you afraid, that what about, your children? And to me, the rationale was really simple. I think I share it with all my colleagues. I could die crossing the street, and then my son would say, my mom died crossing the street, or I could die participating in an incredible project, trying to advance the knowledge of science and technology, representing my country, and then that's the legacy I would leave my children. So it's a small risk for if we don't take risk, we don't evolve, we don't progress, we don't go anywhere, we just stop.
Thank you for that answer. It was a wonderful answer. Chantal, back to you. I'm sorry we're monopolizing the questions over here, but I'm sure you have another one.
Well, Julie, just in line with what you just said, space exploration has led to many discoveries that have moved knowledge and science and engineering forward. Can you give an example of something that was discovered through space exploration or the space program that we might be using now in everyday life?
Thank you, Chantal, for opening that huge door for me. Well, clearly we can't function today without the satellites that go around the Earth. There are communication satellites. There are our meteorological satellites. Some of them, of course, are used for other purposes like surveillance and observation of other kinds, but we also have that very important constellation called a global positioning system that, almost everybody uses every day in North America to get going places. So we are now tributary, we are now in synergy with a lot of technology, including space-based technology. However, to build satellites that last, satellites that do their job, satellites that do what they're supposed to do, you need strong space technology, some space research and materials. Well, that's the kind of thing that space exploration brought, is that fact that today we use satellite technology in our everyday life. We don't even know about it, but I can assure you that the one Canadian communication satellites we have right now, Anik F2, when it fails, everybody in the country is aware of it. We just don't know that it's right there in the background serving us 24 hours a day. So it is part of that we do. The exploration part is part of humans. We are so interested in knowing stuff we don't know. it was so thousands of years ago, it will be so in the future. So right now we have boundaries of where we've been and what we know. One of the greatest recent discoveries, of course, that we've had, and I should say discoveries, plural, is, of course, through our space-based telescope, the Hubble telescope, who has now revealed so many different aspects of our universe. We did not know that. We had to rewrite, basically, our astronomy books in the last 10 years. Fantastic. Now we know that there are many other solar systems like ours that have planets. We expected that, but now we know for sure. I would say one of the next big questions that hopefully we'll be able to answer the day we return samples from Mars or the day we set foot on Mars is whether or not there is a form of life, whether it's bacterial or microscopic, somewhere else than this planet. We suspect it is so. We don't have the exact evidence just yet.
And Thomas, that's one of the questions that we've identified several times on This Week in Science and Education. So interesting that we're talking about it now. And speaking of Thomas, Thomas, you're last
Absolutely.
in today, but you're last out. You get the last question. Go ahead, my friend.
You've made a number of just wonderful points. One of the things that we've talked about in the podcast in the past is the importance of cooperation and working together as part of larger programs. And we've talked to a number of working scientists that have talked about what they're able to do because of that cooperation. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, from a student's perspective, how do you learn to work as part of a group? And I don't know, as somebody who runs a lab where I have a lot of graduate students that have to cooperate to get things done, what can I do to teach them that kind of cooperation? I mean, you mentioned this whole space program is only possible because of the way that Canada collaborates or cooperates with other countries. But you yourself were part of a team up there working there. I mean, team building must be an enormous part of your training. How can we bring that into a classroom, or how can I bring that into my laboratory to help people work better from your perspective as an astronaut, where teamwork is so crucial?
That's actually an excellent question, and I rarely get it, but there is now, especially that we are inside the International Space Station. The station is controlled from mission control in Moscow, in Tsukuba, Japan, in Munich, Germany, in Houston, Texas, and then we even have a small robotics control station in Montreal. With everybody inputting from everywhere, people living together in the tin can, enormous teams working for this. There are more and more looking at ways of team building and making sure that people are team players, which means to be there when you need it, but also to be on the lookout for other people and know what the right thing to do. So one of the ways they've developed that for the astronaut, which you might be able to bring parts of it around your lab, is to put the team inside their comfort environment. Outside their comfort environment, and then have them do things, in our case, very specific, because we're a procedural bunch. Yeah, we have to follow procedure. Maybe in your lab also, but maybe not as much. But you take them out of that comfort zone, that normal, the places where they're traditionally at ease, and then you get them to work together into whether it is to play a game or build something, or in our case, the astronaut, they send us in the wilderness and they have us find our food and do a few activities, but also for several days now being very comfortable in either the snow or in the dry lands or something like that. So outside the basic comfort, which makes you then reach out and do the right thing, where you as an individual become secondary to the team's objective, where your personal comfort or your personal desires are important, but they're not paramount, and they need to be meshed out. And to do that, you need to be put in a situation where you really have to push aside your own thing. So we do leadership expeditions in places, and that you can do by just having, some team sport. Go once a week, play volleyball. That could be just as simple as that. Team playing is not only in my world or in a lab. It's everywhere. When I was asked during my interview as an astronaut how I was a team player, because that was one of the standard questions they asked the final applicants, I answered, and I really thought that they would think I'm silly, but my answer was that I had been singing in choirs for the last 20 years, and that I was really good at singing my part and harmonizing with the other people, and following the directions of the director. You know, I really thought it was a stupid answer at first, and then now, later, maybe it is not as. Anything that will make people work as part of a team might be a good way to instill a sense of team and an esprit de corps.
Okay, Thomas.
That's great.
I think
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Your challenge now, Thomas, is to take the members of your lab and come on a show and sing us a song at some point in the future.
In harmony.
I think you'll be far happier if I don't do that.
Ms. Payette, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm sorry we're out of time. We could talk to you for hours. I know your schedule is tight, though, so we won't keep you any longer. It's been a rare privilege and an honor to speak to you. You're such a role model for students in the classroom and for Canadian society at large. You're truly one of our heroes. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you to Thomas and Chantal for taking the time, and mostly thank you to Mark and Malik. I wish you all the best. I hope you got something, you have something in your mind that you'd like to accomplish, and I would say go for it and dare to dream. Goodbye.
So on behalf of Mark Jackson and Malik Carter, Chantal, Guay, and Dr. Thomas Merritt from Laurentian University, this is Kevin Cougler signing off on another wonderful installment of This Week in Engineering and Education. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you again same time next week.